The apple orchard was actually small when I was growing up. He planted the trees when I was 8, and so what I remember is small trees, and they had just started putting on fruit when I hit late junior high and high school, and we literally sold them off this back porch. Not terribly good outside. I would do some weeding and help, but I was more social. So when we expanded, by that point, Mike and I had gotten married and we started having our 3 boys, and they added on, we just had a little shed, and they built a building and they put a kitchen in and coolers to store the apples, and my dad did all of that. He's very mechanical because it was still a very, very tiny business. I think they did classified ads in the paper, which is crazy to me that those reached anybody, but they did. The best memories was the boys just helping out and running around the orchard.
I did a little bit of everything, picking apples and making cider and talking to people, and it's really given me a different skill set than what I think a lot of other people get.
Mike and I decided to start taking over. Mike has always been passionate about how things are grown, and he loves trees, has always loved trees in some form, and then he married an apple orchard girl. So Mike is different. He's more innovative. He likes to try new things. He likes to research. My dad does too, but his is more mechanical, whereas Mike's is more agricultural.
Well, we was wanting to maximize what property we had because we're such a small farm. We wanted to maximize the growth potential and like the high density apple trellising that we do. So we were going to take out all the old apple trees that weren't producing and put in new apple trees on the high density trellis. Well, it's kind of take out a little bit of the old and put in some new and just kind of take small sections at a time. So it's been 4 years now since we started doing that, and we're still not done. My sons help replant, and my father-in-law, he helps. Wife, Jennifer, she's out there helping. It's a couple of day process to plant the trees, plant the trees, but the prep work and everything takes me, I start now in the fall, and then next spring I'll have some work to do, and then the actual planting of them takes a couple of days.
I helped plant those trees whenever we were doing all those. We got them all done, and I remember my dad saying they weren't doing so good.
So I ordered those trees. That spring I got them planted, had them in the ground. Of course, we did it fast, had a regular planter that you rode on and you plucked the trees in as you went along. And I was like real proud and everything. And that summer, things were going pretty good. Okay, they were looking okay. And then we went on vacation. We usually go on vacation for a little while before we open the store up. So we had gone and we came back, and I came back and the trees were all droopy. I mean, like every single tree was droopy, not looking real good. Leaves were getting yellow. And so I had reached out to all my other apple growers on what do I do, and I mean, I asked questions after questions to different sources, and I never could get a real answer on what to do and how to fix it. And everything they told me to do, I did it, and nothing worked. Take a little tiller and go around the trees and scratch the surface because they thought maybe it was locked in with the way the ground was sitting there. It would harden over. The minerals and the water was not getting down to the root systems. So I loosened all that. I put fertilizer down. I injected it with a liquid fertilizer, injected all around all the trees with liquid fertilizer. Finally, a university guy came out and said that I had replant disease. I should just take them all out and wait 7 years on the block of land to rest and then I could plant again in 7 years. I don't have 7 years. I exhausted all of my outlets for answers, and a 7-year plan wasn't going to be viable to sustain me for those 7 years. But it would have just been bulldozed out and put into corn and beans, and there wouldn't be an orchard.
Mike was very worried, which definitely bled over into my mind. I'm typically not a worrier. I'm more of the, it'll all work out. I just simply prayed about it, and even though the growing of the apples is not my thing, I know enough from hearing how we do things and helping him that I know enough to be concerned.
I was in the store walking back and forth by the counter, and Jennifer, the wife, was talking to an older gentleman, and they were talking about the days we grew strawberries here. I really didn't want to get involved with that conversation, so I just kind of kept walking by a few other times. And then he started talking stuff about nutrition of the strawberries, and I thought, wait a minute, nutrition of the strawberries? It's like, then I stopped and I looked at him. I was like, do you know anything about growing apple trees? He says, no, I know absolutely nothing. I'm like, well, that's unfortunate, but I still want you to come out and look at them. So he comes out to the field with me out back, and he's looking at the trees, and he's like looking at them. He's like, you definitely have a problem here. I'm like, yeah, I know. I was like, I retired from my job to do this, and now I'm kind of regretting it because I can't get a tree to grow. So he goes, let me call my buddy. He might help you. He's an agronomist. So he gets on the phone with the agronomist, and long story short, he said, go down and get the micronutrients out of your barn that we were using in your fields, if you have any left over, and have him put it on at this rate, and you'll be fine. And I'm like, yeah, right, okay. Well, I'll give it a shot, though. I've been trying everything else, nothing's worked, so I thought, well, I'll just try this. So he goes and gets me the micro solution, tells me how to put it on. So I did it to 10 trees. I thought, well, if it kills the trees, I only got 10 of them that's really going to affect, but if it works, then we'll go from there. After applying it 2 days later, the leaves dropped off and new shoots started forming on the trees. It's not going to fix the old leaves, but it's going to drop them and put on new leaves. Then I got the sprayer out and I hit every single tree out there. And within 3 or 4 days, every single tree was pushing new growth. The micronutrients work with the soil and the sugars. When you apply the micronutrients, it's a leaf feed. You apply it to the leaves, it absorbs into the leaves. It overproduces sugars, which in turn pushes those sugars into the soil. Soil is alive with biology, microbes, earthworms. The biology in the soil then in turn feed the plant. Dirt is dead and you're relying on chemical fertilizer to feed the plant. So you could add compost to a field and it take 20 years to do what this would do in 5 by the acceleration of the sugar production. So the micronutrients was invented by the agronomist, but he's also a chemist. And it took him 7 years to come up with the formulation. He had several references for what a plant needs to be fully genetically expressed, all the missing minerals that a plant would need to do what it's supposed to do. Very easy to use. It's basically, it's a super high concentrate, so you're buying a concentrated bottle and you just mix 1 ounce per gallon of distilled water. When the sun's going down or just coming up and it's kind of calm on the outside plants, that's the time to use it. We put it on everything now. Every time I drive by anything I want to grow good, I put some on it. My house plants, I put it on it. It just doesn't matter. So when I met the farmer that took me out, I took out into the field and he called the agronomist, I got answers that I was been looking for. I mean, I was starved for questions to be answered, and he could answer them. A couple days later, after it was working, I got a hold of that farmer. I was like, hey, you tell him everything's working, and I'm like, I've got more questions. I was like, what would he charge me to come to my farm and consult me? And he's like, well, it depends on how boring you were, because he's pretty highly intellectual, and if you're kind of boring, he loses interest pretty quick. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have a problem then. But the next day, I get a phone call from him, and he said, well, the agronomist will be there in 2 o'clock, at 2 o'clock. Are you gonna be there? I'm like, yeah, I'll be here. So he came here and sit out here in the parking lot with me, and I had a sheet of paper, and I asked him every question I could ever imagine. He's like, what have you done to the land to have the habitat to grow? I'm like, I haven't done anything, I don't know anything. He's like, well, you got a lot to learn. He's like, we just start out with this, micronutrients. Earthworms are your best friend. You need to create a habitat for the worms. The excess sugars in the soil will loosen the soil, and the worms are going to come in, and it's going to cycle. It's what nature intended the cycles to be. So we spent 3 years together working on it, and he's like, why don't you start selling it in your store? Because he has the facility to make it, and he only uses it in large-scale row crops to help with big tracts of land. But the average guy like me, the small guy, or the guy that even smaller that has just a couple trees in their backyard, or a rose bush or a garden or whatever, doesn't have access to it. He's like, you can be the place where people can come for answers and be able to buy it, and say, if you want to start a business together, he goes, I'd be more than happy to go in with you, and you can have the rights to sell it. I'm like, yeah. So we started putting it in bottles. People would come in, he was right, people would come in and they're always asking me questions on problems with things that they're growing. And then just as we were starting to launch the actual business of the micro business, he passed away. And I was actually on a beach down in Florida after New Year's, because we take a little break from the farm for a week or so down in Florida just to kind of relax. And so they told me the news, and I was just like, I had nowhere to go. And here I would be outside doing something outside to take my mind off of it, but there I had a process, because I just had a beach in my mind, and it hit me pretty hard to learn of his passing, because I had so much more to learn from him. But I did learn a lot in 3 years that I spent with him. I would say every day we had a conversation, and thousands of texts. And I was kind of like his, he took me under his wing and made sure I had all my questions answered and simplified everything for me. But I waited a few months, then contacted his son. His son runs his businesses. And he said, basically, whatever my dad was doing with you, I'm good with it.
Mike's Mighty Micros, yes.
We wanted the micronutrients to be available to the average person.
This kind of product yield the results in plants, trees, and everything. I haven't seen anything do this. So concentrate, you get so much from one little bottle. You wouldn't think that it does that much, but it does a lot.
I'm definitely hopeful. It's been great to watch our customers try an apple and come back and be like, that was the best apple I've ever had. It's not something to hoard, or, we just want everybody to be able to experience that with their vegetables and fruit that they have.
With nutrition involved right now, with everybody's health and locally grown and soil health, it's pretty important to have a product like that at your disposal.